It was a calm summer evening in a small town. The streets were quiet, the sun was slowly setting, and the air smelled of fresh rain. In a corner house on Maple Street lived Marcus Johnson and his 11-year-old daughter, Maya. She was cheerful, always humming little songs while doing her homework or helping her father water the small garden behind their home. Marcus loved her more than anything in the world. To him, she was not just his daughter. She was the reason he woke up every morning with hope. No one in the neighborhood really knew who Marcus was. People only saw a polite man who kept to himself, helped his neighbors fix fences, and never raised his voice. He was calm, quiet, and respectful. But deep inside, he carried years of memories that most people could never imagine. Before moving to this peaceful town, Marcus had served in one of the most secret and dangerous military units in the world, Delta Force. He had traveled through war zones, saved lives, and carried out missions that were never written in newspapers. After years of risking everything, he finally came home to raise his daughter in peace. That evening, Maya asked her father for a small favor. "Daddy, can I go get some ice cream from Mr. Clark's shop?" she asked sweetly, holding out a few dollars from her allowance. Marcus smiled. "All right, pumpkin, but don't take long. Dinner's almost ready." She laughed, grabbed her backpack, and ran out the door. Marcus watched her through the window, feeling thankful for the simple moments he now had. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, 2 police officers were responding to a report of a robbery suspect. The caller had said someone wearing dark clothes was running through the neighborhood. The officers, already tense, began driving through the nearby streets, their radios crackling with noise. It was the kind of misunderstanding that starts small but grows quickly. As fate would have it, Maya was wearing a dark hoodie that evening. It had small white stars on it, her favorite one because it glowed in the dark. She walked into Mr. Clark's store, bought her ice cream, and chatted politely with the old shopkeeper before stepping outside. The street was empty except for the faint sound of sirens in the distance. She looked around, nervous, not knowing the officers were already driving down the same road. When the police car turned the corner, the headlights flashed across her small figure. One of the officers shouted from inside, "Stop right there." The sudden voice frightened her. She froze, her ice cream falling onto the pavement. She tried to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. The officers stepped out, pointing flashlights at her face. "Hands up!" One shouted again. The confusion grew. Maya was scared and took a small step back, tears forming in her eyes. Then everything happened too fast. A sound echoed through the street. People nearby came running, hearing the noise. The ice cream lay melting beside her backpack. By the time Marcus heard the sirens, something in his heart told him something was wrong. He ran down the street, his boots pounding against the ground. When he reached the corner, he saw flashing red and blue lights, a small crowd forming, and officers standing in a circle. His eyes searched desperately until he saw her, his little girl, being lifted into an ambulance. His world suddenly went silent. He tried to reach her, but one of the officers stopped him. "Sir, please step back," the officer said, unaware of who Marcus really was. Marcus's hands trembled as he looked past them, seeing Maya's small hand hanging off the stretcher. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just stood still, breathing hard, his eyes cold but calm. Every instinct from his military years was now awake. He noticed every movement, which officer held which weapon, who looked nervous, who looked guilty. At the hospital, the waiting felt endless. Doctors rushed through the halls. Machines beeped in the background. Marcus sat outside the emergency room, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the floor. In his mind, he replayed every mission he had ever been on, every moment when he had to stay calm under fire. But this was different. This was personal. A young nurse came out, her voice gentle. "Sir, she's alive, but she's in critical condition. We're doing everything we can." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "Thank you," he whispered. He stood up and looked through the glass window, watching the doctors work. Outside, news of the accident spread fast. Reporters gathered near the police station. Some people were angry, others confused. The department called it a tragic mistake. But Marcus said nothing. He didn't call the media. He didn't make threats. Instead, he went home that night and opened an old box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were his military badges, photographs, and a folded letter signed by his old commander, proof of who he once was. He stared at the items silently, his reflection hardening in the glass. He then sat down at his desk and began writing notes, times, names, everything he remembered from the scene. The calmness in his actions was almost frightening. His hands didn't shake. His breathing was steady. Years of training guided him even now. Later that night, he returned to the hospital. The hallway was quiet except for the sound of machines. Maya lay still, connected to wires, her small chest rising and falling slowly. Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand gently. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. He leaned closer and whispered softly, "Daddy's here, baby. You just rest now." As the clock ticked past midnight, Marcus looked out the window at the empty parking lot. His reflection stared back at him, a man who had fought wars, faced danger, and survived it all. But nothing had ever hurt him like this moment. He knew this wasn't a battlefield, but he also knew injustice when he saw it. He didn't want revenge. He wanted truth. But the fire in his eyes told another story, one of quiet determination. He whispered to himself, "You picked the wrong child." And from that night on, the town would never be the same. Marcus Johnson, the quiet man no one really knew, was about to remind everyone that real warriors don't fight for pride or anger. They fight for love, for justice, and for the people who mean everything to them. The world was about to find out who he truly was, not through violence, but through the power of truth, courage, and a father's unbreakable heart. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in the hospital room beside Maya, listening to the quiet sound of machines. Her little hand rested in his, still and pale. Every few minutes, he looked at the door, half expecting someone to walk in and say it was all a dream. But it wasn't. It was real, and the pain was heavy in his chest. He had seen men wounded in battle, but nothing compared to seeing his own child lying helpless. The next morning, he watched the sunrise through the window. A doctor came in and said Maya would need time to recover. "She's strong," the doctor said gently. Marcus nodded. "She gets that from her mother," he whispered. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out. He wasn't angry, but there was a deep calmness about him. The kind of calm that comes before a storm. When Marcus reached home, the neighborhood was quiet. But he noticed something different. Reporters standing outside the gate. Someone had leaked the story to the media. Cameras turned as he walked up the steps, but he said nothing. Inside, the house felt colder than usual. He went to his study and turned on his old laptop. He began gathering information, typing faster than he had in years. He searched public records, police reports, and body camera logs. He knew how the system worked. He had worked with intelligence units before. He knew the truth often hides behind paperwork. Hours passed. He barely moved. He contacted one of his old friends, Colonel Davis, a man who still worked inside the Pentagon. Davis picked up after the first ring. "Marcus, I saw the news," he said quietly. Marcus's voice was steady. "I need access to the body cam footage from the local department," he said. Davis hesitated. "You know that's restricted." Marcus paused for a moment. Then call it a favor for someone who once saved your life in Helmand. Davis didn't argue after that. He only said, "Give me a few hours." By evening, Marcus had what he needed, the truth. The footage showed exactly what happened. Maya was holding nothing but a small paper bag, her voice trembling as she tried to speak. It was clear she was no threat. The officer had acted out of panic. Marcus watched it once, then again, and then he turned off the screen. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Now I know." The next day, he went to the police station. Reporters were still gathered outside, asking questions the department refused to answer. Marcus walked through them without saying a word. Inside, the chief looked nervous when he saw him. "Mr. Johnson, please, let's keep things calm," the chief began. Marcus sat down across from him and placed a small flash drive on the table. "I think you should watch this," he said calmly. The chief played the file. When the video ended, the room went silent. The chief took a deep breath and rubbed his forehead. "We'll open an internal investigation immediately," he said. Marcus leaned forward. "No, not internal. Public," he said firmly. "People need to see what fear can do when it's in the wrong hands." His voice was low, but every word carried weight. The chief nodded slowly. Soon, the story broke on every news channel. Decorated Delta Force commander exposes truth behind shooting. It was everywhere. Reporters replayed the video again and again. People in the town were shocked. Many who had stayed silent began to speak up. Peaceful march started forming outside the station, not out of hate, but out of unity. When Marcus finally agreed to a press conference, the room was packed. Cameras flashed as he stood behind the podium. He wore a simple black suit, his face calm but strong. Reporters shouted questions, but he raised his hand and the room went quiet. "I spent 20 years protecting this country from enemies abroad," he said softly. "I never thought I'd have to protect my child from the ones wearing the same flag." The words echoed in the hall. People listening on the news felt the weight of every syllable. He didn't call for anger or revenge. Instead, he called for change. "Training must include humanity," he said. "Because when fear controls a person with a weapon, it's not protection, it's danger." His speech was shared across the country. It inspired many people who had felt helpless in similar situations. Meanwhile, Maya slowly began to recover. Each day, she grew a little stronger. The first time she opened her eyes, Marcus was sitting beside her, smiling softly. "Hey there, sunshine," he whispered. She tried to smile back but was too weak to speak. He brushed her hair gently and said, "You rest. I'll take care of the rest." Weeks later, Maya was able to walk again with the help of a nurse. The hospital staff adored her courage. She even started drawing again, small pictures of her and her father in the garden. When Marcus saw her smiling again, something inside him finally began to heal. The police officers involved were suspended pending investigation. One of them, Officer Turner, requested to meet Marcus privately. Many advised Marcus not to go, but he agreed. They met in a quiet room at the station. Turner looked broken, his hands shaking. "I didn't mean for any of it," he said softly. "I was scared. I didn't think. I made a terrible mistake." Marcus looked at him for a long time, then said, "Fear can destroy more than bullets ever could. You'll have to live with that, but I hope you learn from it." He stood and left the room without anger, leaving Turner in tears. Over the next few months, things in the town began to change. The police department started new community programs. Officers attended workshops on communication, empathy, and responsibility. They invited Marcus to speak at one of the sessions. He stood in front of a group of new recruits and told them, "Your badge isn't just a symbol of power. It's a promise to protect life, not just to survive it." The recruits listened in silence. When Maya was finally strong enough to go home, the neighborhood gathered to welcome her. Kids from her school made banners that said, "Welcome back, Maya." Even the mayor attended, thanking Marcus for showing the town what true strength looks like. Marcus didn't make speeches that day. He just held his daughter close and smiled. Later that evening, the two of them walked through the park where they used to go before everything changed. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. Maya held her father's hand tightly and said, "Daddy, are you still mad at them?" Marcus looked down at her, his eyes gentle. "No, baby," he said softly. "I'm not mad. I'm just proud that you're still here." They sat on a bench as the wind brushed through the trees. Maya leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt peace return to his heart. He had fought in many battles in life, but this one had taught him something different. That the greatest victory is not in fighting back, but in standing tall with kindness and truth taught as night settled. The park lights came on, and they walked home together. The world still had its flaws, but for Marcus and Maya, it was enough to know that love, courage, and patience could turn pain into purpose. And though the scars would always remain, they were no longer signs of loss. They were signs of survival, of strength, and of a father's unbreakable promise to his daughter.